the studio tonight with us, we have Vic Walczak. Vic has been overseeing litigation statewide as a legal director at the ACLU of Pennsylvania since 2004. He has personally handled many nationally significant cases. In 2020, Walczak led the ACLU PA's litigation defending democracy, participating in more than half of the 30 lawsuits in Pennsylvania to preserve voters' rights. Welcome to the program, Vic.
Hi. Yeah. Thank you, Connie. Sorry, I should know how to unmute by this point in the pandemic. Sorry.
That's okay. But I'd just like to start out our conversation um, with the issues surrounding mail-in voting. There's a lot of confusion around what it is and what it isn't in the legal arena, along with whether or not it's a reliable way to cast your vote. Can you talk to us about this?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, people have been voting by mail in this country for over 100 years. I mean, going back to the Civil War, and you think about people who serve in the armed forces, whether they're away from home in this country or especially if they're overseas. I mean, these are not people that you want to disenfranchise. And so, there's been provision for armed services members to vote by mail for a very long time. That has been expanded significantly in the last decades. In many states, everybody votes by mail, either by mail or online. Pennsylvania has been one of the more restrictive states. And so until 2019, the only way you could vote by mail is if you are in the military or if you essentially had a doctor's note saying that you couldn't get to a polling place, or you signed an affidavit saying that you're going to be away from the jurisdiction because of work. But, for other reasons, if you just felt like it was inconvenient, whatever, you couldn't vote by mail. And then in 2019, the legislature overwhelmingly passed something called Act 77, which expanded mail voting to anybody and everybody. Right? You did not have to have any kind of particular excuse. If you wanted to vote by mail, you could do that. And it turned out to be critically important because everybody knows what happened in March of 2020. We got hit with this pandemic. There was an awful lot of people who didn't want to, who were vulnerable, who were afraid, legitimately afraid to go to the polls. And in 2020, in Pennsylvania, we had almost 2.7 million voters vote in some fashion by mail. And that's out of about 7 million total voters. It is safe, it is secure, and it is easy.
Now, Philadelphia, we are a multicultural and multilingual city. What kind of services and protections are there currently in place to ensure that non-English speaking citizens can freely participate in their right to vote? And are there any concerns that you have regarding this issue specifically?
Yeah, so under the Federal Voting Rights Act, or what's left of it after the Supreme Court has been taking a sledgehammer to the protections for the last decade or so, Pennsylvania has 3 counties that are called Section 203, which means that they've got enough people who are, whose primary language is other than English. And they are required to provide all services in that other language. And the 3 counties are Lehigh and Berks, which have to provide services in Spanish. Philadelphia is not only Spanish, but also Chinese. That's a new designation as a result of the last census. And what that means is that those 3 counties are required essentially to provide all services in not just English, but in Spanish, and also in Philadelphia in Chinese. And I got to say that at this point, we're still looking at what the counties are doing. In the past, they have not done everything that's required of them under the law. So for instance, they need to, all directions, things on the website, they need to translate into these other languages. They need to set up a helpline on election day where people can call and speak in that language. Ballots have to be translated. And in the past, that has not been fully done. So at this point, the ACLU, working with a number of allies, we're kind of canvassing what these counties are doing it, comparing it to what the law requires, and we'll politely ask them to make sure that that is happening. And if it's not done, then there is obviously the option of going to court, which is something that we're prepared to do.
Okay. And I read your article regarding voting and how the Republicans want to subpoena the personal, private, identifiable information of every person in the state that voted in the 2020 election. What kind of information are they asking for? Why do they want this information? And look, Vic, it's now 2022. Isn't it time to move on from 2020?
No, I would say to that last question, it's both time to move on and not time to move on. I think there needs to be a reckoning and an accounting of what happened in January of 2021, notably on January the 6th. I think there also needs to be a national dialogue about how the 2020 election was the largest we've ever had, but also the most secure and probably the least number of problems. And what we're seeing here in Pennsylvania with this subpoena that you reference, right? It's being pushed by just a handful of Republican senators on a committee that has no jurisdiction over voting. And the only reason they're doing that is to try to create uncertainty in people's minds about the integrity of elections. I mean, this is all about delegitimizing elections so that then they can say, oh, there was a problem with the election, and then they can replace the will of the voters with who they want to be elected. I mean, this is what Senator Williams was talking about. It is a critical issue. It is a real threat to our democracy. The details of this subpoena that they are asking the Secretary of State to turn over is not only just the information that is in your voter registration list, like your address, your party of registration, your date of birth, but they also want the critical data that you provide to prevent some kind of fraud. So that includes your driver's license number and the last 4 digits of your social security number. And anybody will tell you that if that information gets out, there is a huge amount of mischief that can be done, whether it's some kind of identity theft or financial fraud, or they could actually use that information to vote in your place. I mean, it's a way to really delegitimize elections. And you say, why do they want this? We've been asking that question since September, and we still haven't gotten a clear answer on why they need that particular information. But this is a very dangerous effort. The ACLU is in court on behalf of 8 voters, the League of Women Voters, Common Cause, Make the Road, trying to prevent the committee from eventually accessing all this really important personal information.
Thank you for that. Now, there are a lot of concerns regarding the current trends we're seeing in terms of changing the voting laws. And we don't have a lot of time, but can you describe succinctly this situation to us and let us know what about this concerns you, and also how it relates to the work the ACLU is doing?
Yeah, I mean, all of it concerns me. There are more problems in other states because Governor Wolf has either blocked or threatened to block some of the more serious efforts to make it. So it's basically making it harder to vote. trying to sort of sow distrust in the elections. And ultimately, the most dangerous one is to take away democracy. Is like if Senator Williams was saying, if you don't like the results of the election, the legislature, which is controlled by the Republicans, are going to be able to come in and say, hey, we don't like the results. We think there was a problem. We're going to say that our guy won. And it is a huge problem all across the country, including in Pennsylvania.
Okay. And well, I really appreciate you, Vic, coming on to share all this information.